My wife cheated on me with her boss, then spent $250, $0 from our joint account to buy him a house, and now she's claiming I'm legally entitled to half the property's value. This feels like everything is unraveling after 15 years. I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here, writing about how my wife, Emily, betrayed me after 15 years of what I thought was a solid marriage. The kind of marriage where you think you know everything about each other, where trust is supposed to be unbreakable. But then, one day, everything unraveled in a way I never saw coming. It started with small, almost insignificant things, little signs that I brushed off at first. Emily was suddenly more distant, secretive about her phone, deleting messages. She became defensive whenever I asked about her whereabouts or why she was so tense all the time. I figured work was stressful, or maybe she was just going through a phase. I mean, she was always a bitchy, sharp-tongued woman, but I loved her. I convinced myself that her attitude was just her way of dealing with life's pressures. Then, things took a sharp turn. I noticed her spending habits changed drastically. She'd come home late, claiming she was working late or had to meet clients. But her phone would ring late at night, and she'd sneak off to answer it, whispering in a way that felt intentionally secretive. One night, I decided to check her phone, just to see if I could catch her in something. I didn't want to invade her privacy, but I also felt something was off. I found countless texts from her boss, Mark, a guy she'd always said was just a colleague. But the messages weren't professional. They were flirtatious, intimate, and downright inappropriate. What struck me most was a string of pictures she had sent him, explicit, clearly taken during moments she thought no one was watching. I was stunned. I never thought Emily, my wife of 15 years, would do something so reckless. I never wanted to believe she could cheat on me, especially not with someone like Mark, a slick, self-absorbed guy who's always been a little too charming for his own good. The worst part was the timing. These messages were recent, from just a few weeks ago. I felt a sinking feeling in my stomach, like I'd been punched in the gut. I stared at her phone, trying to process what I'd just seen, and I knew my world was about to change forever. I didn't confront her right away. I needed to gather my thoughts to understand what I was really looking at. I was furious, betrayed, humiliated, but I also knew I had to be strategic. I started digging a little more, checking bank statements, her email, anything that could give me a clearer picture. That's when I saw the real shocker. A transfer of $250, $0 from our joint account to a shell company, supposedly for investment purposes. But I knew enough about money to realize it was a house, her way of buying Mark's affection, maybe even a way to set up a future with him. That's when everything clicked into place. Emily wasn't just cheating on me. She was planning something bigger, something that involved our entire life savings. The next morning, I laid it all out. I confronted her with the evidence. She was caught off guard at first. Her face turned red, then she started spinning stories, claiming the messages were misunderstandings, that Mark was just a friend, that I was paranoid. She called me crazy, said I was overreacting, that I didn't understand her work situation. But I knew better. I saw through her lies. I'd always been a cautious guy, but this felt like a punch to the chest. I never thought she'd be capable of this level of betrayal, especially after all these years. It was like the foundation of our marriage had been built on quicksand, and now it was collapsing under her lies and greed. I felt numb, betrayed, and furious all at once. My mind raced with questions. How could she do this? Was it about the money, or was it about Mark? Or both? I wasn't sure anymore, but one thing was clear: I had to decide what to do next. After I confronted Emily that morning, everything changed in an instant. Her reaction was classic: denial, blame shifting, and a tone that reeked of entitlement. She looked me straight in the eyes and told me I was overreacting, that I didn't understand how stressful her job was, and that Mark was just a friend she'd been talking to about work issues. She even had the nerve to call me paranoid, like I was the one losing it. But I wasn't buying her bullshit anymore. I had seen the messages, the money transfer, the pictures. There was no way she could spin her way out of this mess. I felt my blood boiling. How could she be so selfish? After 15 years, all the promises, the birthdays, the anniversaries, she was throwing it all away for some guy who probably only saw her as a conquest. I sat there, staring at her, trying to process what was happening. I was angry, yes, but also crushed. I had trusted her with everything, my life, my savings, my heart. And now, it felt like she had taken all of that and flushed it down the drain for some affair and some shady real estate deal involving our money. That night I couldn't sleep. My mind kept racing, replaying everything I'd learned. I kept thinking about the house she bought for Mark. What kind of sick game was this? She spent $250,000 from our joint account, money we had saved for our future, for our kids, on a house for her lover. It was like she was trying to erase me from her life, or maybe just make her betrayal more concrete, showing that she was willing to spend our life savings on someone else. The betrayal ran so deep I felt like I was drowning. I started looking into her financial situation more carefully. I needed to understand just how deep her betrayal went. I hired a lawyer and an accountant to help me trace the money. What I found out was worse than I expected. The house was not just a simple purchase. It was a strategic move designed to secure her affair with Mark. She used our savings, our joint account, and even took out a mortgage in our names to buy the property. The house was luxurious, multiple bedrooms, a pool, all paid for with our hard-earned money. And Emily was claiming she was entitled to half the property's value now, saying it was marital property because we were married. That's when I realized she was trying to pull a fast one, claiming part of the house after she'd already spent our money on it. I couldn't believe her audacity. She was trying to turn the tables on me, making it seem like I was the villain for catching her. She kept insisting that she was entitled to her share because we were married and that I was just jealous or insecure, but I knew better. This wasn't about entitlement, this was about greed and betrayal. She had lied, cheated, and stolen from me, and now she wanted to justify it with some legal bullshit about marriage rights. I felt sick. I'd given her everything, my trust, my love, my savings, and she'd thrown it all away for Mark and his house. The more I dug, the angrier I got. I was starting to see a pattern. Emily's bitchy, manipulative attitude was her way of masking her greed and selfishness. That night, I sat alone in our living room, staring at the documents, the messages, the bank statements. The betrayal was like a knife twisting in my gut. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just let her get away with this. I decided I would fight her legally, push back hard, and make sure she didn't walk away with a penny of our hard-earned money or the house she bought with it. My plan was to expose everything, her affair, her financial deception, her lies. I was done being the victim. I was going to take control of this mess, no matter how ugly it got. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that people like Emily don't change. They only get more desperate when they're caught, and I was ready to fight for what was mine. The days that followed were a blur of legal consultations, late-night research, and trying to keep my emotions in check. Every time I looked at Emily, I saw that bitchy smirk she always had when she thought she was getting away with something. Now, her facade was cracking, and I could see the panic behind her eyes. She knew I was onto her, and I could tell she was trying to spin a new story, one where she was the victim, claiming I was controlling and paranoid. She even started crying, acting innocent and hurt, as if I was the one tearing our marriage apart. But I wasn't buying her act. I knew her game. She's always been good at lying, twisting things around to make herself look like the victim. That's her go-to move, bitchy, manipulative, and always with a new excuse. She kept insisting that the money she spent was for us, that the house was our future, and that I was just jealous of her success. She said she deserved a part of the house because we were married and that I should just accept it. But I knew better. She had already spent our savings on Mark, and now she wanted me to believe she was entitled to half the property because of some twisted idea of marriage rights. I started gathering all the evidence I could, screenshots of her texts, bank statements, the contract for the house, and the transfer receipts. I also hired a private investigator because I wanted to be sure there weren't other affairs or shady deals I didn't know about. Turns out, Emily had been secretly meeting Mark for months, sometimes even during business trips she claimed were work-related. The pie confirmed she was sneaking around, and that she'd been funneling money into her secret real estate purchase. It was a gut punch. The woman I'd trusted for 15 years was lying, cheating, and scheming behind my back. I decided I needed to confront her again, this time with everything laid out. I called her into the living room and I played every piece of evidence I had. Her face turned pale, and for a moment she looked genuinely terrified. She tried to deny everything, claiming I was crazy, that I was making it all up, that Mark was just a friend and none of this mattered. She even said she deserved to buy him a house because she was working hard, and that I was just jealous of her success. That's when I snapped. I told her that her lies weren't going to work anymore, that I knew about the affair, the money, and her plans to cheat me out of everything we had built. I laid out my plan to protect myself legally. I told her I was going to file for divorce, and I was going to contest the house and the money she'd spent. I also told her that I was aware of her claim to half the property, and that I would fight her in court. She looked at me with that bitchy smirk, trying to act like she still had the upper hand, but I could see the cracks in her composure. I knew she was scared, because she'd underestimated how far I was willing to go. I wasn't just going to roll over and let her walk away with everything she'd stolen. I had nothing to lose now. My trust was shattered, my marriage was over, and all I wanted was to make her pay for what she'd done. The emotional toll was heavy. I felt a mixture of rage, sadness, and a strange sense of relief. Rage that she could be so selfish, so manipulative, and so damn ruthless. Sadness that our relationship had come to this point after all those years, but also relief that I was finally taking control of the situation. I realized that I couldn't undo what was done, but I could make sure she didn't get away with it, at least not without facing the consequences. I was ready to fight her in court, to prove that her lies and betrayal didn't entitle her to a dime of what we had. And I knew from that moment on, everything was going to change. I wasn't going to be the naive, trusting husband anymore. I was going to be the one who fought back. Over the next few weeks, the legal battle kicked into high gear. I hired a good divorce attorney, someone sharp, experienced, and unafraid to go after her. Emily, of course, did her best to act like the victim. She'd call me, crying, insisting she was doing everything for our future, that she only wanted what was fair, and that I was just trying to ruin her. She'd lie and spin stories about how she needed the house, how she deserved her share because she'd sacrificed so much. That bitchy attitude of hers never changed, even as she pleaded and guilt-tripped. But I knew her game. I'd seen her manipulate people too many times. The more I dug into her financial records, the more I uncovered. She had taken out multiple new credit cards in my name, racking up thousands in debt. She'd also set up a trust for Mark, probably to hide the house's assets or to make sure he was protected. It all painted a picture of someone who was willing to do anything to secure her affair and her new life with Mark. The house she bought for him was worth over $1 million, and she claimed she was entitled to half of it because we were married. But I had legal grounds to contest that, especially given that she spent our savings and took out a mortgage without my knowledge. One night, after a long day of meetings with my lawyer, I found myself staring at the documents again. I couldn't believe how far she'd gone, lying, cheating, spending our future. I'd always thought I was a cautious guy, but Emily's betrayal was a blow I never saw coming. It was like the rug had been pulled out from under me, and I was left trying to stand up in a world that now felt completely different. I realized I had to be prepared for a fight, one that might go on for months, maybe longer. But I was determined not to let her walk away with a dime of what we'd built, especially not after what she'd done. The courtroom dates kept getting pushed back, but every hearing revealed more of her lies. She tried to claim that she was entitled to the house because she was married, and that I was just trying to ruin her. She even accused me of controlling her, of being jealous, and of trying to take everything away from her. I didn't bother arguing with her anymore. I had the evidence, and I knew I was in the right. My lawyer warned me that Emily might try to go for full custody of our assets, but I was ready. I had nothing to hide, and I was prepared to fight her in court to protect what was mine. Emotionally, I kept swinging between anger and numbness. I was furious that she could be so selfish, so manipulative, and so damn ruthless. But I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I'd trusted her with everything, my heart, my savings, my future, and she'd thrown it all away for Mark in some stupid house. Every time I looked at her, I saw the betrayal, the lies, and the greed. I wondered how she could be so bitchy, so unapologetic about her actions. To her, it seemed like she was just entitled to whatever she wanted, no matter the cost. Despite everything, I knew I had to stay focused. I couldn't let her win. I had to keep fighting, keep digging, and stay one step ahead. Because if there's one thing I learned, it's that people like Emily don't change. They only get more desperate when they're caught. And I was done being the naive guy who trusted her blindly. Now I was the guy who was going to make her pay for what she did, even if that meant tearing everything apart to do it. I was prepared for the long haul because I knew in my gut that justice was on my side and I wasn't going to stop until I got it. The months dragged on and the legal process became a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Every court date, every new piece of evidence felt like a fresh wound. Emily's attitude only worsened, more bitchy, more manipulative. She'd show up dressed to impress, acting innocent when the truth was right there in the documents, the bank statements, the texts. She'd sit across from me in court, smirking as if she was untouchable, trying to spin her lies even when the evidence crushed her. Her lawyer was equally sneaky, trying to argue that she was entitled to part of the house because of some vague notion of marital contribution, even though she'd spent our savings on Mark and bought a house in his name. One of the most shocking moments was when she claimed she had no idea about the transfer of funds, like she suddenly forgot that she'd personally authorized it. She insisted she was just trying to secure her future, that Mark was her partner, and that she deserved a share of everything. Meanwhile, she kept calling me controlling, jealous, and paranoid, trying to paint me as the bad guy. I couldn't believe her audacity. She was lying through her teeth, and I had the proof to back it up. I felt a mixture of rage and disgust every time I looked at her. But the real blow came when she suddenly claimed that she was entitled to half the house because we were married. She argued that since she'd been part of the process, she deserved a fair split. That's when I realized she was trying to use marriage laws to her advantage, laws that, in her mind, meant she could take everything I had, especially since she'd spent so much of our money on Mark's house. I was furious. I knew I had a strong case, but I was also aware of how manipulative she could be. She'd try to spin every detail to her favor, no matter how much evidence I had against her. Throughout all this, I kept feeling a strange mix of emotional exhaustion and determination. I was angry at her for betraying everything we'd built, but I was also tired of fighting. Still, I knew I couldn't give up. I had to stay strong, keep gathering evidence, and prepare for the final showdown. I realized that Emily's bitchy, entitled attitude was just a mask for her greed. She lied, cheated, and stole from me, her own husband, and now she was trying to justify it in court. I couldn't let her get away with it. I had to fight for my rights, for our money, and for the truth. Looking back, I see how her lies and manipulations were part of a bigger plan to get everything she wanted, Mark's house, my savings, my life. But I also learned something about myself. I learned that trust can be shattered in a second, and that some people's greed knows no bounds. I've become more cautious, more guarded, but I also know I can stand up for myself. I won't let her take everything without a fight. The battle isn't over yet, but I'm not backing down. I'm ready to see this through to the end, because I refuse to let her walk away with what's not hers, especially not after all she's done. Whatever happens next, I know one thing for sure: I'll never trust blindly again. By the time the court date finally arrived, I was exhausted but resolute. I had spent months fighting her, digging into every detail and preparing myself for the worst. Emily, of course, showed up with her usual bitchy smirk, trying to look innocent, like she hadn't spent months secretly planning her betrayal. But I wasn't fooled anymore. I sat there across from her, knowing that this wasn't just about money or the house. It was about justice, about making sure she didn't get away with everything she'd stolen from me. The judge listened carefully to both sides, looked over the mountain of evidence I presented, and then, after hours of arguments, made her decision. She ruled that Emily was not entitled to half the house, because technically, the funds used to buy it were from our joint account, but the house itself was considered separate property, purchased with her own money or through a mortgage that I had no knowledge of at the time. The judge also ordered Emily to return the money she had spent from our joint account, including the $250 transferred to Mark's house. She was furious, screaming that I was ruining her life, that I was controlling, that she deserved more. But her protests fell on deaf ears. I felt a wave of relief wash over me as the court's ruling sank in. I had fought tooth and nail to protect what was mine, what we had built together. Emily's manipulative, bitchy attitude couldn't change the facts. She had betrayed me, lied to me, and tried to steal my future. Now she was going to have to face the consequences. I knew this wasn't the end of everything, but it was a significant victory. A part of me felt hollow. After all, I lost 15 years of trust and love, but I also felt like I'd finally reclaimed some sense of control. In the aftermath, Emily tried one last time to guilt me, claiming I'd ruined her life, that she was the real victim. But I saw her for what she truly was: selfish, greedy, and manipulative. I decided to move on, to rebuild a life that didn't include her toxicity. I sold the house she bought for Mark, paid off what I could, and cut all ties. It hurt, but I knew I deserved better. I came to realize that sometimes people like Emily don't change, and the only way to protect yourself is to walk away and fight for what's right. Looking back, I can honestly say I learned a lot from this nightmare. Trust is fragile and betrayal cuts deep. But I also learned that even when everything seems to be falling apart, your marriage, your savings, your sense of security, you have the power to stand up and fight back. No one is entitled to everything just because they say so. Justice isn't always easy, and it doesn't come fast, but if you stay true to yourself and fight for what's right, you can come out the other side stronger. Now, I'm rebuilding my life, taking it day by day. I won't forget what happened, but I refuse to let it define me. I hope anyone reading this who's going through something similar learns that you're not alone, and that even in the darkest moments, there's a way out. Keep fighting, stay honest, and never let someone else's greed or lies take away what you've worked so hard for. Because in the end, the truth always finds a way to come out, and justice, no matter how long it takes, will prevail.